the primary unit in Asian, African, perhaps Latin American countries is the primary unit of society is the family. Whereas France, the United States, the primary unit of society is the changes your entire perspective. Now, this is not good or bad, it's different.
And we're live today here on Imagine Fitting In, and I usually say special, but this is truly a special guest, Father Satish Joseph.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time, and look forward to us getting to know you and exchanging some information. And I know you have some, just like most of my guests, everybody has an original story. And this podcast is all about mentors, primarily, healthy living and community. And I'm looking to try to just create little nuggets of inspiration and insights as my little tagline says there, inspire young lives and or young or old, right? So first, typically, before I ask you a question about where your origins and stuff, would you give us, the listeners, just a summary of what your life is now and your day-to-day kind of your responsibilities in the community of Dayton?
Well, it's primarily here in the Catholic Church, as you can imagine. I have 5 parishes that I am the pastor, of which I'm the pastor or the parish priest. And so there are 3 schools along with that, which makes both administrative and pastoral work and pretty intense and demanding. I mean, there are times that I'm talking to a student. The next time I'm anointing somebody who's about to pass away. The next moment I'm at a wedding meeting, and there's another time I'm probably doing a funeral. But as kids ask me, I think the way I look at it is much of my day is spent doing good, and that gives me a tremendous amount of what I want to say. It makes me feel that I'm being useful. So yeah, day to day there is no schedule. Here I am. After this, I have to be at a meeting at St. Mary's Church downtown, trying to make sure that we can get that taken care of, because it's in a neighborhood that is kind of reviving, but we do need the help that we can. And then immediately after that, I have another meeting for faith formation. So it's day to day. I how it moves, how it goes. Yeah. All I know is that I'm interacting with a lot of people,
right?
And that of all age groups and all life situations. So yeah, that is what my daily life is.
So it's full. It sounds
very full.
It sounds like you have been. It sounds like a very, both well-needed position, a probably well-earned position, but that's all. We get back to that whole thing of be careful what you ask for.
I don't know if I asked for this, but here we are. Okay.
Okay. And I love how you say, right? You feel like you're doing good. You're serving, right? So I usually start basically, ask guests where were you born? Where do you call home today? And what was your childhood? What would your parents do? What was life like from where you're from?
Yeah, so I grew up in India, and of course India is a huge place, but I grew up in a small town called Jabalpur, and really means city of rocks. And so I grew up in Jabalpur, in a state that is central to the country. Although my parents are from down south, they moved there for employment purposes. So I was born there, and my dad was a civil engineer in a government. So the company produced electricity for this particular state.
Hmm.
And so, and it wasn't a private company. It was a public company. And so he worked there for the water supply department. And then my mom worked in the office for the same company.
Oh.
And so that's where we grew up. As you know, India has multiple languages. My parents initially did not speak the language to which they came, but they learned. And when we grew up, I naturally learned up growing the language there. But then there was the language at home, which is Malayalam. And we spoke Hindi in the state, but I went to a school that was an English medium school. So I was trilingual from my very birth.
Okay.
We were not wealthy because, you work for the government. It's not like you make a lot of money. But my parents were very, very fiscally very responsible, very careful. They had other siblings that they also raised because both my mom and my dad were the older siblings of their families.
Oh.
And they came from large families. So when they left home to work, they were also taking care of their parents back home, who are all farmers. And so, they did really, really very good. And so I was born and brought up there, and have great memories of my childhood. My parents were very caring, very loving. Not by any means, have the resources to splurge on their children, but we never heard for anything. And so that was our upbringing. Right. And I have a sibling, my brother, who's 5 years older than I am.
Okay.
So the two of us and the four of us made a great family.
Right. Mm-hmm. So that whole 3 language thing, like it's like you didn't know anything. You just probably was brought in that environment.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You were stimulated at a young mind. You probably just consumed it what you had to.
It's so natural in India that it's we don't even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, right now I speak 5 languages, and people ask me, how do you do that? It's just part of that culture. That's how you grow up.
Right.
Picking up another language is not something that we consider to be too difficult. People just do it.
And I think what's interesting to me about just other languages, because I gave a round of French and Spanish, and I can, my joke with France is like, the French is I can tell when they're talking about me. And I gave it a go, but I always would make this excuse of I was too busy working on other things. But that being said, I think learning another language, in terms of like, it takes such a concentrated effort to listen, to really be present, listen, and then like articulate actually sounds out of your mouth, right. New ones in through your brain. And I think that would be.
I think it stimulates a part of your brain that you otherwise would not.
Yeah, and I think just off the top of my head, I would say that's probably a pretty good idea, just to make it mandatory that they try to at least have introductories, to.
As we get older, they tell us, learn a new skill.
Yes.
I think for your brains, there's nothing more helpful or stimulating than learning a language.
Right, I've heard that. So, did your parents move? Were you born in the city where they moved?
Yes.
Okay, and did they were working at the same company? Mm-hmm. How did they meet? Did they meet back in the down south? Yeah.
Okay. It was an arranged marriage, typical of the 1930s.
Okay.
So yeah,
it was or wasn't?
It was.
It was.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, and I can imagine the 30s, right? It's a different time.
And arranged marriages have come to mean something very different now, mm-hmm. Compared to what it was then. But still, it's very much in the culture. But more and more as I go and go back to India each time, the culture has changed so much. And when I first came from India, somebody asked me, "Oh my gosh, you have arranged marriages there, isn't it?" And I said, "Yes. What's the other option?" So they were telling me all about it. I said, "And how's it going?" And so,
ooh, touche.
not that the alternatives. It's about what people make of their lives, whether it's an arranged marriage or not. Having said that, there is a lot of room for negotiation and trying to get to know people within arranged marriages. Having said that, it's part of the Indian culture, that still does remain at the back of people's minds, even though there are younger folks who probably choose an alternative way to do this.
Right.
But yet, even if they do it that way, families are integral to the decision.
Right.
In other words, two people just don't say, okay, this is mom, this is my guy, this is my girl. Well, first we got to know the family. So all that stuff happens. So there's the blessing of parents on their children, making sure that all that is a very still an important part of that whole culture.
It's just so honorable, and for me, the first thing that hit my head when you said that was the old thing about when, kids, especially young men, running around, and the company you keep, and just not even the girl you're going to marry,
right?
But what's a company you're keeping,
right?
And why? And for me, I look at my own experience with that. It's almost like I had no skin in the game, and you have this open option. America's wonderful. I mean, it's it's both a blessing and a curse not to have that strong cultural integrity because of the wash of so many cultures coming to the United States and being blended into this idea of we live in a democracy and it gives us free will and free speech and freedom of religion. But then also it gives such a free reign of openness that without some guardrails, myself, I found myself in environments where I was trying to fit in and imagine how I tried to always try to be myself. But what I end up understanding later in life is that there's a lot of adaptive behaviors that we all do, both known and unknown, and both negative or positive, that we do to survive or kind of address the situation at the time, what we know. So, but I think that what the biggest thing that happened with me when I went to France, my sister married a guy from France, it just opened my eyes to the fact that there is other ways of living and perspective on the day-to-day rituals and the family and the breaking the bread, which is just a beautiful thing. So when you were a kid, I always ask this question, your earliest memory as a kid, do you remember having any kind of dreams of visions of where you saw you wanted to do? Any dreams of being
Actually,
a kid?
I don't. And part of, so here's the other, I talk about culture, and sometimes culture is our building. Sometimes culture can be oppressive as well. In the sense that in India, every parent wants their child either to become a doctor or an engineer, right? And so sometimes that is so ingrained in the growing up. So no, I had no dreams, but so the answer to your question, whether when I was a really little kid, did I have? Actually, I did. I hated school.
Okay.
I was not the brightest kid then.
Okay.
Life changed afterwards, but I didn't want to go to school. I was not the academic kid.
Do you know how many I have had? You are probably close to my 50th guest. Do you know how many people said they love school so far?
Was it you?
No. And it's funny you say that because I kind of proudly announce this now through my podcast. I mentioned this before that I could have been an A- student easy. I could have worked every teacher. I could have worked them, but I was too preoccupied and I was fascinated with music when I was younger. Didn't have the means to kind of explore it hard, and we're just kind of going through the paces. But then it's so funny that during COVID, I went back to Sinclair, and I was on the honor roll three semesters in a row, Dean's List, and I'd never done that when I was a kid. But that mindset, right? So any interest, or it was just like when, if not dreams, like any interest that like when you were coming into age at school time, you ever
music,
play any sports?
Music, more music.
Music, okay.
Music. I mean,
Nice.
I was, besides church choir, I used to sing a lot. And so I was invited to sing at places. And then in high school, we had a little band that we actually sang Beatles.
Oh yeah, far.
But it was just 5 of us, and so I would.
I got to give a fist bump on that one. Yes, that's awesome.
Yeah. So we would do that. So music is where I spent my.
Okay, you got to just tell me one Beatles song.
What? She's just 17.
She's just. Oh, that is nice. Much respect. I think between music and art, our culture, really depends on it, and it flourishes it with it, and it helps, us survive. So now, when you were in school, did you have any teachers, in your, elementary, high school, what we perceive as our, related levels there of education? Any teacher that was like made an impact on you?
I went to Catholic school, and so we had teachers, but we also had nuns and priests. And so, but of all the people that I remember is my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Solomon. She's the one I remember, and I think I said I was not the easiest kid to be taken to school, but Mrs. Solomon made it all good.
Oh yeah.
So that's what I remember. As I growing up into high school, it was more a couple of priests that did influence my thinking. There were other teachers, and I'm not sure whether we look at teachers in the same way that America looks at teachers. I really like my teacher. Yes, teachers are, the whole hierarchical thing is very, very, very strong, right? And so the whole cultural element of your teacher is your guru, right? Your teacher is not your friend. I mean, we don't talk to teachers like sometimes here parents and kids talk to teachers. That doesn't happen. Right? It's a revered position, and so we touch their legs, right? We bow down and get their blessing, and not every day, but in general, that's the sign of honor that you saw. So I think it's something to be said about when you look at a teacher, you're not trying to like her, you're trying to respect her, you're trying to and all the teachers were helpful, they were good. I mean, they were good teachers. But so when you ask me the question, had an impact on my life, I don't even know how to answer that question, in the sense that they are more the ones who share wisdom with you, and you respect and you honor them, than you are trying to like them, or to be liked by them, for that matter. That's
the ultimate definition of a revered or really very respected mentor, because they're there with knowledge, and you should not necessarily bow down, but show the kind of respect. And I mean, I think that, obviously it's probably the same exact vibe and feel in India today, but America and its propensity for, I don't know what you call, like, hey, you can get freedoms, but like, hey, listen, there's a line there. And I was just speaking the other day about I had a civics teacher on, and talking about, like trying to do educational programs for a school that I thought that would be beneficial, and try to approach somebody. And they're like, no, well, number one, like, do you have a child here? Number two, we don't really have any money. Our teachers are still buying all their supplies for their kids. And it's just, I repeat this multiple times in multiple episodes. It is a crime. It is obscene what goes on here. And I don't know if it's a sense of ultimate control or what, but it's just sad in terms of like the most powerful, richest country in the world. And we have, healthcare from the 1910, and the education system almost is not as right. Terrible. So like in your teens and your 20s, where were you in your teens and your late teens?
So I left the seminary for the seminary when I was 17 and a half. So my teen, the later teens were in the seminary. So I was there till I was 28. So I joined in 1983 and I was ordained in 1994. So I spent bulk of my teen and early 20s in the seminary in formation.
Okay, and that was in India.
That was it.
Okay.
In Bangalore, I moved from my hometown to come to Bangalore.
Okay.
Where the seminary was, and that's where.
When did you? Was there any kind of experience, or when did you realize that was your path?
Really not. I mean, I remember when I was in 6th grade telling my mom one day that I think I want to be a priest, and Mom said, "Okay, we'll see." And then when I finished high school, I mean, high school was truly interesting, and high school could have gone either way. But when I finished my high school, I told, I think it's what I want to try. And I don't remember a voice in my head or, trumpet playing or angels singing or anything, an experience that said, "Oh, you want to be a priest." No, it just was somehow, it's in some ways hard for me to explain how I would say I knew I would. I think I went to the seminary to try. I stayed another year. I stayed another year and then another year, finished 12 years. Came to the point where I had to make a final decision. I did that.
So you were like 29, right?
28.
28.
So I just went ahead and said, okay, it's time for me to get ordained, and I'd go on. And do you make, mistakes as you navigate, life as a priest or do you have the wisdom, as I look back at something, I could have done something better, but that was your calling. And you just followed your heart. And then for 5 years, I just traveled the length and breadth of the country, preaching missions and building community and all that stuff till I came to France. We talked about France. I came to France and did my diploma in pastoral communication. So it was my hands-on with mass media. And then I came to UD to do my master's in communication. So I did that in mass media as well.
Nice.
So, and then I finished my Ph.D. In theology. So really much of what I do with some of the media work that I do myself is a coming together of my theology and my communication background.
Nice. That's fantastic. Now, was UD, you went from France to UD?
Mm-hmm.
And did your time in France, do you remember how that came to be that UD was the target?
Well, there was somebody from UD who had come to teach us in France, and they suggested that I should try. I wanted to go to Concordia University in Montreal. It's got one of the best communication programs. But then she said, "Come to Dayton," and I'd never heard of Dayton.
Right.
So I sent in an application, and somehow I was in.
Nice. And so what year did you actually arrive in Dayton?
I arrived in the United States on the 6th of June, 2000.
6th of June, 2000.
And I came to Dayton on 12th of August, 2000. And school began on the 15th.
Nice. Yeah, so that's, the old thing that, you said that you tried it. It must have worked. There was nothing, turning you astray from your intention, and it complemented the world. And
I wouldn't say that I haven't had my doubts, right? I'm not saying that. So it's not as smooth as, 12 years.
That is a long time.
Do you want to try something else? Even though things popped in your head, a seminary is a lot of relationships, right? With superiors, with your classmates and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there are ups and downs, and sometimes you go through a crisis about, really, are you in the right place? And I've asked those questions. But somehow, as I said, at the end of it all, let's do this another year. And here we are.
Okay. So I'm curious, what was it, as you remember back in 2000, what was the biggest cultural change? I mean, obviously going from India to France, How do you find that culture over? Like, I'm curious. What surprised you from going to India to France? What stood out there? Anything memory in terms of like cultural makeup or attitude?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there are things that are common to India and France. One of them is family time, sitting down and having meetings, right?
Excellent.
Even for lunch, right? There's a bottle of wine on the table, and then the lunches are 1 hour long, and then people take a little siesta, or
sure,
and I think India is that way. No bottle of wine, but India is a sit down, home and have kind of food kind of stuff. And it's so part of so that was very, 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 very telling to me. Of course, East and West, and perhaps this is more prominent in the United States. I think one of the things that is truly you notice is how the primary unit in Asian, African, perhaps Latin American countries is the primary unit of society is the family, whereas France, the United States, the primary unit of society is the individual. And this is a huge. It changes your entire perspective. Now, this is not good or bad. It's different. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
There are pros and cons to both. Like when the family is the primary unit of the society, that can be very upbuilding or can be very oppressive. The individual is a primary unit of the society. That can be very liberating or it can be very oppressive. Right, all depends on
sure.
But that's one of the biggest things that I notice between the West and the East. Right, what is a primary unit of society? We don't make decisions without talking to our elders. Right, we don't go on a path without consulting with elders and talking to people. So. And you don't take decisions that are going to be harmful. They may be good for you, but if they're not good for the family, they're not good for anybody, right? These are all things that are very prominent with our cultures.
Right, and it's interesting because I think I was listening to some recent world history about France and the leaders and the control and the English wanting to partake in that whole concept of that shift of that, almost the French Revolution I don't know if it worked its way into that, that kind of free will when you say that from the family to the unit as to the individual. There's this, like you said, I completely agree that obviously there's nothing good or bad about it, but then when you can see over, obviously, from in India, as a family, and all these other Latin American countries, and all these more older cultures, with that such a model, it's so sustaining, and it survived for a reason, right? It flourished. It probably was necessary to flourish and survive, and then all of a sudden, can we say it's gone sideways, or just this different route from a human development standpoint, and the combination of technology and progress and culture, right? How we live our daily lives and how the stresses. And if anybody has seen and know, the trials and tribulations of families in the United States, it's probably you. And one of my previous guests that was a Dayton police officer, seeing firsthand the dynamics and that kind of stuff in terms of, where we move to a society, both good and bad, and where the stress points and all that kind of stuff. So, to me, I'm fascinated by the fact that I'm assuming that you speak French.
I don't. I actually that was the time when I said I'm going to be here 9 months, and the thing is, I was there for 9 months, and I was fascinated. I was fascinated by France in the sense that they had a tremendous amount of respect for beauty and order, in the sense that you do. I for the first time understood what window shopping was. And I was in Lyon, and I lived in a very chic part of Lyon, but I would walk the streets of Lyon, and my goodness, you could walk through a candy store and you could stand in the window and appreciate how each candy is carefully placed, and it's a piece of art.
Right.
Every window is a piece of art. And public transport is great, so you could just go anywhere you want, take a bus and go.
Right.
Oh my gosh, that part of it was just fascinating, and for that it's both different. Between, so India is perhaps not as clean as Europe, but when I came to the U.S., you're talking about cultural shock.
Okay.
I could not walk. There were places where I could not walk because people said you would get run over. I wasn't saying that. I came to St. Louis for about 2 months, and they had no sidewalk, and anywhere you needed to go, you needed to get into a car.
That rural environment, large country.
Not only rural, like even in Dayton now you can move. Sidewalk. We are still in Beaver Creek. We're still building sidewalks. Right?
Yes.
But if you wanted to go anywhere, it's not in India. I picked up my bike and I left.
Right.
I couldn't do that when I came over here. First of all, I didn't have a car. I had somebody to take me everywhere all the time.
Right.
So that was the biggest culture shock for me, honestly, that you need a car. Without this car, you can't survive.
Right. The mobility restriction.
That's not, and public transport is terrible.
Yeah.
You could not take a bus and go anywhere, right? Or if you have to wait for hours France was just so. Coming to your question, the course that I did was bilingual, so I decided to just do the course in English and enjoy France.
There you go. Okay. So when you mentioned about France and that artwork, it just highlights what I experienced when I was 21 to France. I spent like 30 days there. And my old joke was when I woke up in the morning, I had been already working out that time. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready for some breakfast. And all of a sudden I said, like, when we, whatever, they finally get up and they just serve a piece of bread and coffee. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. And then when are we going to eat? So then lunch would come by and it'd be like noon. And we do that. They break people come home from work and it's cook and whatever. Somebody's bringing the wine, the bread, whatever, and they're cooking. And I'm like, then my question was, when are we going to stop eating? Is that too much?
It goes on. Yeah.
Right.
And dinners too. Yeah. Early dinners.
But the beauty, the artwork, the care and effort through that, every single thing that you ingest is a part of your being. And then when you can culturally sit down and share with your family and have that time, that's really special. And that is probably the biggest thing that I was kind of shocked by. And it was both like, whoa, and then I really respected that. And at that time, I'd been single, living by myself at 21 years old. Nobody told me my brain hadn't developed. And I come back from that trip. And the biggest thing I learned was I'm going to the grocery. I had this little small refrigerator, a small apartment in Chicago. And I'd go to the grocery. I have to go to the grocery almost every 3 days. And they pick up fresh food. So I replicated that France's focus on that fresh food. And that was just a tremendously wonderful lesson for me. So now you're here in Dayton. You are go to UD, and then you mentioned your Ph.D. program, and you also do that at UD. Okay, and then where'd you go from there?
So I was always living at Immaculate all these years because I was a resident priest. I needed a place, and they needed somebody to help out with ministry. So I was kind of doing two jobs. So I was working full time, and then also doing my classes. So I've been at at Immaculate from 2000. In 25 years, I've never changed my residence. So I stayed here. Then I became the associate pastor for St. Helen and Immaculate.
Okay.
And then I became the pastor for. I became the associate pastor. Then I became the pastor for both those places. Then I became the pastor also of St. Mary's. And then 3 years back, I also became the pastor of Holy Wheels in Cincinnati. So where did I go from here? In 25 years, it's been a long journey, and it's quite a lot.
I mean,
but I did nothing with my PhD. What I mean in the sense that I have gained a lot of knowledge, but in terms of academic work, and I miss it. I miss the research. I miss the academics. I've done some publishing, of course, but I have just dedicated my life to church. But of course, all the education that I did shows in my heart. If I say I don't do research, that's probably not right, not correct. But what I do is use the language that I have to be able to speak to people and speak with people in a way that's enlightening.
Nice. And wow, so you're literally 5 parishes, 3 schools. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, to what degree that you interplay with the schools? Like,
on a daily basis, it's more keeping in touch with the top leadership.
Okay.
But I say masses for them. Like this afternoon, I was there for confession at Holy Angels at 12:45. Mm-hmm. I was listening to confessions with 4 other priests, right? And so I say masses for them. Saturday, I did a retreat for those kids who are making confirmation. Mm-hmm. So the engagement is not in the classroom. The engagement is outside of it, and it's a lot of. But kids, based on how you do masses, when kids really want to talk, they'll seek you out.
Right.
So I do that as well.
Nice. So tell me a little bit about, and I know you love animals, mm-hmm. and what was your inspiration for your organization you started, Mercy Pets? Right. And can you tell us a little bit about that organization?
Yeah, so, Mercy Pets, I never planned it. It really developed. Children's hunger has always been my very, if I may use pun on words, my pet cause. And the reason was, in the 1980s, I grew up getting to know about the Ethiopian famine. And I don't know how many people remember this. It was I don't know how many millions of people died, and it was news across the globe. That's when the artists came together, Michael Jackson and the rest, and came up with that concert where the famous song "We Are the World."